Hare Krishna. Thank you everybody for participating in this Kartik 2021 event, which is all about enriching your Krishna consciousness. Just as a preview, I'm sitting in the temple room in Budapest, and around me are all English-speaking Hungarians. So sometimes I won't be looking straight at the camera, sometimes I'll be looking at my notes, and sometimes I'll be looking at the devotees and hoping that they haven't fallen asleep. So this is actually a GBC SPT event, and it's meant to be serving the devotees in Kartik. It's going to be a month-long broadcast of celebrating Kartik 2021. So you're going to be able to see this both on YouTube and Facebook, neither of which I follow. But anyway, I'm here. And every day, senior Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis will be presenting talks on different chapters of Krishna book and the 10th Canto, Krishna-lila pastimes, specifically in Vrindavan. So, sounds very intriguing, at least certainly a few I'm definitely going to follow. And there'll also be a series of talks on Damodara-lila or Damodara-ashtakam. My note here says, I don't know whether that means just on the Damodara-ashtakam itself or the Lila. That's happening in multiple languages. This, as far as I know, is in English, and it's also going to be virtual parikrams of Braj. And that's a pretty pain-free process. It's a lot different than walking barefoot on the thorns of Vrindavan. Although you may not be purified by the thorns of Vrindavan. And then, of course, in this month of Kartik falls Srila Prabhupada's divine disappearance, his Tirobha festival, and so there'll be several broadcasts with Srila Prabhupada's disciples or followers, grand disciples, and talking, maybe great-grand disciples, and talking about their relationship with Srila Prabhupada, their realization with Srila Prabhupada, and looking at the clock, see how long we take. And so don't miss it. These are really going to be extremely enlivening presentations. And I've already seen some of the list of devotees who are going to be talking. And some of them are going to be our own devotees from Hungary. But you have to subscribe. So subscribe to the following: youtube.com/GBCSPT and facebook.com/GBCSPT. Pretty easy. We've got a screen over here, but I think you're seeing this also as I'm speaking. And today I'm speaking on the 17th of October. And this also happens to be the disappearance day of Raghunath Das Goswami, Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, and Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. So we're not going to be speaking about them, but it's a very important day in our Vaishnav calendar. So let's start off the way we always start off, Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. To save time, we already sang Jai Radha Madhava earlier and did our Premadvanis, so we won't be sharing that. Let me give a little introduction as to what it is that this specific presentation is about, which is entitled, what's its name? Damodara-lila introduces spontaneous devotion. This is an introduction both to the 10th Canto classes the devotees are going to be hearing. If your 10th Canto readings, which obviously devotees do in their regular readings of Srimad Bhagavatam, and very much into this Damodara-lila, which is now, I can't count which pastime it is, but it's right at the very beginning. It encompasses the 8th to the 11th chapters of the 10th Canto, or at least it spreads over those. And presentation that I'd like to give is a means or an instrument to actually understand not only this Damodara-lila, that's how I'm going to be referring to it, not only Damodara-lila, but also the entirety of the 10th Canto, Srimad Bhagavatam itself, and a perspective on what actually the sadhya and sadhana of Gaudiya Vaishnavas is, Srimad Bhagavatam's recommendation for us, and the goal of Krishna consciousness and how to actually achieve it. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu met Ramananda Roy, who was recommended to him by Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, you should see this very exalted Vaishnava because he is such a wealth of transcendental knowledge. So Lord Chaitanya started off with a very basic and very fundamental question. Although the topic escalates and gets more and more elevated, intricate, and confidential, but Lord Chaitanya asked, please tell me, what is sadhya, what is perfection, and what is sadhana? And what is the process, what is the means for attaining it? So, Sambandha Abhideya and Prayojana. And then they go through that whole sequence, which I'm not mentioning. So similarly, Srimad Bhagavatam shares, obviously, the same sadhana and sadhya that you will find in the 8th chapter of Madhya Lila of Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is a very extensive and long chapter of which Srila Prabhupada wrote a book way back before he came to the West called Ramananda Samvad. It was actually discovered in just one of his trunks in his residence in Radha Damodar Temple. Someone was rummaging through these dusty old suitcases and came up with not just this book, but other writings of Srila Prabhupada. Really very, very valuable. And it's not published by BBT to the best of my knowledge, but it was published by Nishinga Maharaj, my godbrother, who has since passed away. So when we come to the 10th Canto, and this is still part of this sort of introduction, that there's a real swing, there's a real change of direction in what Shukadeva Goswami starts talking about, the subject matter, and the actual real content. And the idea here is that Srimad Bhagavatam, Shukadeva Goswami, reveals actually the inner purpose of the Bhagavatam. So what's the Bhagavatam actually want? It's offering a lot of things, but what does it really want? And what is that topmost perfection that it speaks about right in the very beginning? Satyam Param Dhimahi. Well, what is Srila Vyasadev's meditation? What is he suggesting that we as Vaishnavas, Paramahansa Nirmatsaranam, what are these Paramahansas actually meditating on? And that is available for those who follow them. What is the process by which they can actually get there? And so when you speak about something, you naturally give an example of both what it is and how it's attained. So that's where Damodara-lila comes in. This real change starts taking place, or takes place, at the 8th chapter of the 10th canto. And I'll speak about that a little more. I just want to highlight one thing, which I may repeat again, is that Srimad Bhagavatam, like Vedic literature, is not light reading matter. It is a study book. It's meant to be studied. You can't really understand, and I think this presentation will highlight that. You can't really understand it just by reading. Do you read Srila Prabhupada's books? Yeah, I read Prabhupada's books a couple of times. You're not going to really understand them unless you actually read them, study them under guidance. So all of these things are part and parcel. And one reason is, and this is why sort of academics consider that Vedic literature are sort of a composite of different people's ideas that have come about at different times in history, which is different than ours. Our perspective of Vedic literature is whether you're talking about the 4 Vedas, whether you're talking about subsequent Brahmanas, whether you're talking about Upanishads, Vedanta Sutra, Itihasas, Puranas. You're talking about eternal knowledge that has been brought about at some particular time or at different times. I'm just getting now distracted because our I don't even know how you say it in English. Our blinds are coming down. So the presentation of Vedic literature, and it's also stated like that, is quite bewildering. And it certainly bewilders scholars in that it appears like you have different languages. By different languages, meaning different types of Sanskrit. Original Vedic literature, original Vedas, and for instance, Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam are a different type of Sanskrit. And some are more complex, some are more simple. This is all eternal. Yes, this is where I got distracted from. It's all eternal knowledge. It's all spoken by the Supreme Lord. How it appears, when it appears, at what time is really a detail. And all of that vast learning has a cohesive, coherent purpose, which you can, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu just summarized, Param Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtanam, chant Hare Krishna. But there's more to it than that, to getting there, and how you chant Hare Krishna, and what's the goal of chanting Hare Krishna, and but it is cohesive, but it's not the way we're used to learning. We're used to learning, especially when I went to university, went to high school, and so on. We always have a very systematic presentation where everything comes one after the other. But Vedic literature is not like that. Some of it is here, some of it is there, some of it's here, some of it's there, and you got to put it together. And you're going to see the same thing, that when we're talking about this sadhana and sadhya, and what is actually the purpose of Srimad Bhagavatam's 10th canto, some of it is here, some of it is there, some of it Bhagavatam says, some of it Prabhupada says, some of it, I'm going to quote Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he says, and you have to be able to put all that together. So that's why you have to study, because by reading it, it's not built like this. Okay, so let's start, but we're going to go back. We're going to start at the first canto. And in the first canto, something very important happens. And I think everybody's aware of this, and that is that Krishna is established as a Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now that shouldn't be news to anybody. I think all of our viewers are clued into that and know that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But this is stated in a very important way in the third chapter of the first canto. And you see this verse that Sutta Goswami speaks, and I'm quoting it now. Ete chamsa kala pungsa Krishna stu Bhagavan Swayam Indrari Vyakulam Lokam Hridayanti Chuge Chuge. And here's the translation. All of the above-mentioned incarnations are either plenary portions or portions of the plenary portions of the Lord, but Lord Shri Krishna is the original personality of Godhead. All of them appear on planets. Whenever there is a disturbance created by atheists, the Lord incarnates to protect the theists. There's a whole run-up to this with a description of different avatars and incarnations, starting with the Purusha avatar, starting with Lord Mahavishnu. This verse is very important because it is called the Paribas Sutra. And especially the phrase, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Jiva Goswami, to great degree, I'm not sure now whether it's Krishna Sandarbha or one of his Sandarbhas. Which Sandarbha? One of the Sandarbhas. He gives an elaborate explanation of what a Paribas Sutra is and why this is the Paribas Sutra. This is not something that Goswamis made up. This is a traditional Vedic system of analysis of Shastra or Scripture. And Paribas Sutra is a statement, usually a verse, which governs the book that it's in. And that book may be a small book. It may be a book of, he says, millions of verses. And this book is what defines the Siddhanta and the purpose of that particular book. So Paribas Sutra will do that. Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. And it is the key to understanding sometimes things that are mentioned in the books that seem to be unrelated. They may appear to be contradictory. There are contradictory statements in Srimad Bhagavatam, sometimes, and a few that seem to support impersonalism. There are unrelated arguments. Sometimes they are difficult to resolve arguments. And I'll point out one example that requires reference back to Paribas Sutra because its direct understanding doesn't seem to jive. And therefore it needs an indirect or an interpretation of one sort or another. And generally it comes at the very beginning of a book, so that the reader has the instrument by which he's going to be able to understand things. And it's only stated once. Now, we repeat things a lot of times, but it's only stated once. Now, take note why I'm saying that you need to study Srimad Bhagavatam. Sukadeva Goswami doesn't say, now I'm going to say the Paribas Sutra. He's very well aware of what a Paribas Sutra is, but for him, he's just speaking. He's speaking to Parikshit Maharaj. And neither does Parikshit Maharaj say, is this the Paribas Sutra? But unless we have this knowledge and we have this information, which obviously we wouldn't have without our acharyas, and specifically our Siddhanta Acharya is Jiva Goswami, and that's why it's important for us to be making reference to him. So this is the Paribas Sutra, Krishna's to Bhagavan Swayam. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But lo and behold, we go through 9 cantos, and there's very little about Krishna. Now, first canto, there's a summary of Mahabharata. It's sort of a Bhagavatam summary of Mahabharata. And of course, Krishna is there. We hear about Krishna and Arjuna chasing after Ashwatthama, and then sort of the dichotomy that comes up amongst the Pandavas. Should we cut his head off? Don't cut his head off. Anyway, they end up cutting his top knot off. But there's not much mention. Prahlad Maharaj says, Krishna Parato Svatobha. So he mentions Krishna's name. And there's mention of Krishna's name a few times throughout Bhagavatam, but we're talking about different incarnations. Varaha, Lord Nishinga, Matsya, Kurma, all of these other incarnations are being described. And it's only when we get to the 9th canto then we start getting a lead up to Krishna's appearance, and that Krishna's dynasty is being mentioned, and then ultimately Krishna is also mentioned as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But considering that Krishna Stu Bhagavan Swayam, that here he is the central player of Bhagavatam, up until the 10th canto, Krishna's not making an appearance. Now, of course, the main appearance takes place with the 10th canto, and we have abundant information. We have 90 chapters of Krishna's pastimes and of Krishna. But which Krishna? And we'll talk about that. So this 10th canto starts with the birth of Krishna, and I mentioned that there's this sort of apparent contradiction that we need the Paribas Sutra for, Krishna's to Bhagavan Swayam. And what is that? Well, in Kamsa's prison, Krishna takes birth. And the sequence of his taking birth is very interesting. So it isn't that Krishna appears as a little baby, and then he manifests a form of Vishnu, and then again he becomes a baby. First we see Lord Vishnu. And then Devaki says, well, please hide yourself, because, you know, if Kamsa sees you like this, then he's going to kill you, which was sort of an interesting statement. This is the maternal perfection and love of God that she's expressing. And then Krishna becomes a baby, which seems to indicate the immediate interpretation of this is, well, Vasudeva is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and what we see now of Krishna after is actually an expansion, an incarnation of Vishnu. And of course, this is what you're going to hear a lot of if you talk to sort of uninformed people either in the West or in India. It's not just that Krishna is the, 8th incarnation, 9th incarnation of Vishnu, or if you count Lord Balaram, then he becomes the 10th. So But that's not true. But this is what it appears to be like this. So now we need Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam. And there would be different ways of understanding this. Of course, one is that, yeah, why not? Why not Lord Vishnu also show the form of a baby? But then how does that baby become Swayam Bhagavan, or become the original personality of Godhead? How does Krishna come into the picture? In other words, Krishna now is just the incarnation of Vishnu, rather than Vishnu being actually a form of Krishna. So with Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam, we think, well, one resolution is that it's not Vishnu who appeared as Vishnu, but it's Krishna who appeared as Vishnu. Now in Krishna's pastimes, that takes place in multiple places. I won't mention them all. That Krishna also appears. He appears as Narayan. He appears as Lord Vishnu. But it's him. And now it's that Vishnu, Krishna Vishnu, who's appearing in his childhood form. We get another perspective, but that comes later on. But this is one way in which you would need the Paribas Sutra to set things right. Srila Prabhupada will quote our acharyas, and these are statements that are then made later on in other shastra, not later on, but in other shastra, that it is actually Vishnu who just shows a baby form. But that baby form is not the baby form who's going to be playing in the dust of Vrindavan later on, because he's then taken to Vrindavan, and then it appears like Nanda and Yashoda are the foster parents. And again, Bhagavatam doesn't say that, actually, no, they're not the foster parents. Jiva Goswami makes different quotes, cites different statements in different parts of the Bhagavatam, even as far up as meetings in Kurukshetra, where it is clearly stated that, yes, Krishna is your son. This is a statement to Nanda Maharaj. But other scriptures, Padma Purana, or acharyas, and Srila Prabhupada quotes acharyas, that actually Krishna is Nanda Maharaj's and Yashoda's son. And this Krishna, when he's brought by Vasudeva, actually merges into the body of the original Krishna who takes birth. One Krishna took birth in Mathura, and the other Krishna took birth, the original Krishna took birth in Vrindavan, in Gokula. Shukadeva Goswami doesn't say this. He's leaving it up to acharyas, and he's leading up to us studying elsewhere to know this, but it's very important because otherwise Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam becomes challenged, or we don't understand how it applies. Okay, but then after Krishna being there, and now we'll move on, I'm looking at time. This doesn't appear to be a 45-minute presentation. I'll try to make it in 90. Putana, Krishna kills Putana. And then Chakravarti Thakur points out that these are, Krishna manifests the power here of his mouth. Just by his mouth, as a little baby, he sucks out the life of this terrible demoness. Then comes Shakatashura, and Krishna in his third month, he's placed under this cart, and in that cart, this demon has taken a form. It's a cart. Why put him under a cart? It's a traditional cart that is part of the heirloom of Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda, and it's covered with utensils that are, passed down from generation to generation and so on. And part of this ceremony, which is taking place, requires that be there. Anyway, but the demon entered into the cart, and of course, Krishna then just kicked it, and the demon died. The power of Krishna's feet. We see how powerful is Krishna's, and the little cowherd boys, they say, well, he just kicked it and it fell apart. And no one couldn't believe, well, how can a little baby kick it? But that's what happened. After that, we have Trinavarta. And Trinavarta comes, and Krishna wants to look around. He wants to see. Up to now, he's been seeing Vrindavan just from the view of a baby. He's crawling still on hands and knees. So he wants to see what's it look like from far up. Like now we have drones, and you get a really good view of the world from up there. So Krishna used Trinavarta as his drone. And then when he got tired, then he just sort of smashed him on the head. And he showed the power of his hands. And then this shift starts, although not evident, and that becomes very interesting. Krishna eats dirt. He's on the banks of the Jamuna with Balaram and his friends, and he starts to eat dirt, and Balaram goes and he squeals on him. I don't know whether they know how to translate that into Hungarian, and it's not squeal like when you're holding a mouse in your hand, but squeal means that you're tattletale. That's another. So he tells Mother Yashoda that he's eating dirt. Mother Yashoda wants to see. All right, open your mouth and let me see. Krishna opens his mouth, and then he sees the whole universe. Mother Yashoda sees the whole universe. She sees all the planets. She sees our planet. She gets a focusing view on India, Mathura, and there she is looking at Krishna, looking in Krishna's mouth. And she becomes completely bewildered. And she's really overwhelmed. What am I seeing? This is something very, very extraordinary. So now we see the Krishna as this is actually his universal form, that is the shelter of everything that exists. It seems that Srimad Bhagavatam is just continuing on talking about Krishna's greatness, which obviously has been emphasized in the first 9 cantos, because we're seeing the greatness of Krishna's different incarnations. And that seems to be the purpose here. But then something really extraordinary happens at the end of this pastime. Mother Yashoda's digesting everything, and all of a sudden, she becomes overwhelmed. Krishna exerts his Shakti, and she becomes overwhelmed with love for Krishna, and she forgets his divinity, and she starts to think of him as her son. She's starting to think, who is he? Is he some demigod? Is he the Supreme Personality of Godhead? And now all of a sudden she forgets that. And this looks like a little thing. Okay, now let's go on to what's next. This is just a verse. We don't have this on the screen. But she says, immediately forgetting Yogamaya's illusion that Krishna had shown the universal form within his mouth, Mother Yashoda took her son on her lap as before, feeling increased affection in her heart for her transcendental child. So now, we may have not caught this as to what's actually happening here, and it seems like a little thing. Okay, it's natural. Now she got over this, and Krishna manifests his Shakti, and once again she's breastfeeding him and considering Krishna as son. But it's very significant. And it's significant enough for Shukadeva Goswami to really make the point. And did Parikshit Maharaj pick up on it? Well, he certainly picks up on it after Shukadeva Goswami makes his point. And he makes his point in a verse that's coming up. Why is it significant? Because never in 9 cantos has anyone forgotten God's divinity. No devotee forgets that he's God. We have examples, whether it's Vamandev makes his appearance and he's a little dwarf, and there's his mother and there's his father, but everyone's aware, here is Vishnu. And all the demigods come and they make all kinds of divine presentations. We have Lord Kapila has taken his birth. Devahuti raises him, takes care of him, but she never forgets. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has become my son. And ultimately, of course, the Supreme Personality of Godhead instructs her and gives her guidance. So we don't see this anywhere. Prahlad Maharaj doesn't forget that Lord Nrsingadev is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. No one forgets, and there's no devotion or devotional service where all of a sudden the devotee forgets God. Well, that's called Maya. In other words, when you forget Krishna, then you're in material energy. Riterita yapratita na pratita chatmani. When you forget me, that's illusion. And when you remember me, then that's transcendence. Now all of a sudden, we say, here is God's mother, and she's forgotten that he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is an important point, and all of a sudden she's just exclusively treating him as her son. But the whole idea of the basis of, well, not just Srimad Bhagavatam, but Bhagavad Gita is that family attachment is Maya. Now, all of a sudden, this looks like family attachment becomes perfection. So this is quite bewildering. Now Shukadeva Goswami says the following statement, because this isn't something that he's going to gloss over and leave to somebody else. And Parikshit Maharaj didn't immediately butt in and say, I don't understand. So whether he did or not, he catches right after this. And this becomes a very important verse. Traya chopanishad vischa shankya yogash shatvater upagiyamana mahatmyam harisamanyat atmajam. The glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are studied through the 3 Vedas, the Upanishads, the literature of Sankhya Yoga, and other Vaishnava literature. Yet Mother Yashoda considered that Supreme Person her ordinary child. The Shukadeva Goswami says, what all the different levels, yoginam, apisarvesham, different types of yogis, including Vaishnavas, they're studying all different scriptures where Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And their awareness, their consciousness is always, yes, Krishna is God. Now all of a sudden, that same God is being treated by Mother Yashoda as her son, her ordinary child. So he's ordinary and he's her son. So we'll look at the Sanskrit for that. So neither karmis, jnanis, yogis, or devotees, and especially devotees, because we're interested in devotional service, they don't worship like Yashoda. So once again, this is the same family attachment you're supposed to give up. Now all of a sudden, family attachment is being glorified, and this is how you worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's quite puzzling. But furthermore, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says a very interesting statement. He says that this is the Paribas Sutra for the 10th canto. So if you want to understand the 10th canto, you have to use it with this verse. In the same way that Krishna's Tu Bhagavan Swayam is the Paribas Sutra for all of the Bhagavatam, and Jiva Goswami doesn't say this, this is Chakravarti Thakur makes this statement. He says this verse is what you have to adjust everything that you're going to read in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the 10th canto too. And it's actually then relevant because once you are a student of the Bhagavatam, you can go both forward and backward with this understanding, and things then obviously become quite clear. And it isn't that Bhagavatam is just meant to be read once, that once you have this tool, the whole perspective of the first 9 canto becomes different. Now let's see what the Acharya says. He says, one should take this verse as a Paribas Sutra of Krishna-lila. This verse stands as a regulator for all of the pastimes related to Aishwarya shown during Krishna's Komara and Kaishora age in Mathura, Kurukshetra, and elsewhere. So all of the 10th canto, wherever we read about Krishna, and elsewhere means, all right, go back to the first canto when you read about Krishna, that ultimately this Paribas Sutra is relevant. And as opposed to the Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam, here the Paribas Sutra is in itself very important. In other words, that same Krishna that's worshipped in so many different transcendental literature is now being treated and is worshipped in a different way. She's being worshipped by maternal love by Mother Jashoda. And of course, that maternal love expands to fraternal love, to conjugal love, and actually even to servitude, with the same type of mood that she has. He's ordinary, and he's my son, or he's my friend, or he's my lover, or he's my master, but different type of master than the master that the Vaikuntha Dutas, Vaikuntha Basis see Lord Narayan. So in summary here, and I'm looking at time, I was given 90 minutes as the outside, so I'm going to have to move on, but at least we're getting the foundation here. So here, Harim Samatyatatmajam. If you have to focus on any part of this verse, and maybe we can just move back the verse, you can see there, just like Krishna's through Bhagavan Swayam, this becomes the regulator of all the pastimes in the 10th canto that are related to Aishwarya, opulence, to the different ages that we're going to see Krishna in, especially when he steps out of Vrindavan. He still looks the same. He still looks 16 years old, but he ages, he grows, or at least he lives up until 125 years. And in all places, whether it's Dwarka, Mathura, Kurukshetra, or Krishna's traveling to different parts to visit different devotees, or he goes to kill this Pondraka. So in all of these places, this Harim Samanyatatmajam is a regulator. What it really means is that all these other forms are all expansions of Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Guna Swarupam, of Krishna in Vrindavan. And if Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, when we talk about Supreme Personality of God, Krishna in Vrindavan is, that means that the ultimate perfection is that devotion which worships him in Vrindavan. Because we read of a lot of bhakti. We read of Prahlad Maharaj's bhakti, and we read of the bhakti that Lord Kapila Dev talks about, although he is also going to be mentioning this. In fact, very much so. He talks about spontaneous attachment to the Supreme Lord in the different moods of devotional service, but he doesn't say who the Supreme Lord is. And he's coming, he is an expansion of that Supreme Lord. So it's not very clear. So there's many different types of bhakti before and after being presented. But this is the bhakti that ultimately Srimad Bhagavatam is directing especially the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu too, because that will come later in the 11th canto. Well, who is this Krishna Varnam Tisa Krishnam? What is this Sankirtan about? It's about this type of bhakti, this type of bhakti yoga, and of course that's what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu teaches. So, with this Leela, those devotees who practice that type of Braja Bhakti, we'll use that phrase, they will be able to attain the Lord in the same way that Mother Yashoda did. And we have that example now coming up. So, as yet, this is not seen in Srimad Bhagavatam. We haven't seen anything like this. And it's very interesting how, you can just like gloss over this. I don't say you can just gloss over it. I've glossed over it for decades. Oh yes, Mother Yashoda then just forgets about and treats him as her son. Okay, and then what happens? This is very important. This is like a real crucial point that like screams at you. But unless we have proper guidance and direction, then it's hard to really catch the scream. We just sort of lose it. So what this Paribas Sutra is saying is that the topmost devotion is a spontaneous type of devotion. It's not something that's obligatory, it's not something that's directed because of greatness, godhood, supremacy, wonderful activities, killing of demons. It's worshiping God not for what He is, but who He is as a person. And we all have experience, and there are so many, there are lawyers and judges and politicians and other people, and there are temple presidents and GBCs and so on. And these are all positions in which we have interaction with so many people, but very few people are relating to us on this level as who we are as people. It's only when I get home with my family that people actually, they don't care if I'm a GBC or not. They love me for who I am. Or at least they're supposed to love me for who I am. So this is what's happening with Krishna is, all right, I'm God, I'm God, I'm God, and unlimited people follow me and worship me because I'm God, but what about me? What about me as a person? And it's these people who worship me as a person, and it's Mother Yashoda who worships me, and who am I to her? I'm just her son. So, first 9 cantos, later on in the 10th cantos, following Krishna's leaving Vrindavan, 11th and 12th canto, you don't see this. You only see this type of worship in those chapters dedicated to Vrindavan. So let's just look at this again in this 845, which is what you see on the board. If you look at these words, it says that Sa, she, Mother Yashoda, Amanyata, considers her son ordinary. So you got Shastric statements galore is to see Arche Vishnu Shiladir Guru Matir Vaishnava Jayati Buddhi. You go to hell if you think that Vishnu is ordinary. Now all of a sudden, the topmost worship is to think that he's ordinary. So you need resolution of these things, and unless you have the tools to resolve these things, people get quite confused. And therefore, we do have scholars, material scholars, and other people who hear of Krishna's rasa dance and so on, then they say, well, yeah, he is ordinary, and he's ordinary in the offensive way of being ordinary. But he's not ordinary. He's extraordinary, supreme personality of Godhead. So, something's here coming that after 9 cantos that are teaching us to be detached, to follow the way it is, to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to become purification. It can't be that after all of this, we're getting back again to some kind of mysterious thing where we're glorifying parental attachment. So after all of that, after all the teachings of the first 9 cantos of Bhagavatam, which are really raising us, Srila Prabhupada says, yes, first 2 cantos, then you should be self-realized. So after the first 9 cantos, and now we're self-realized, at least in theory, we know who we are, we know who Krishna is, what our relationship with him, we know Sambandha, we're taking up Abhideya, we're practicing it. This can't again be material attachment. So this is a type of worship. It's very mysterious. How do you worship God as an ordinary child and as your son? And this is what Mother Jashoda does. So, of course, the nature of her worship is that she has pure love. And this is something now I'm going to repeat a couple of times, is that unless you really have full faith in Krishna's divinity, even though he rarely makes a personal appearance in the first 9 cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam, but he certainly makes a personal appearance in Bhagavad Gita. He's speaking Bhagavad Gita, unless we surrender to Krishna. Mamekam sharanam braja ahamtam sarva papebhyo. So unless we've surrendered to Krishna, unless we've really fixed in understanding Krishna's godhood and become sufficiently qualified by the practice of devotional service, this is going to become very confusing. Because our whole philosophy is that you build up this understanding of how great God is, and once you have full faith in how great he is, then you can have faith in him as an ordinary child. Then you can start hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto. And this is why talking about Krishna's Lila is not something that Srila Prabhupada did as a general practice. He rarely talked about Krishna's pastimes, because unless people have this adhikar or qualification, which the first 9 cantos of the Bhagavatam teach, you get bewildered. Well, what's going on? This can't be spiritual. So, and it's so extraordinary. This type of worship, this type of bhakti that Mother Jashoda has, is not only is he ordinary, but even when he does something extraordinary. My little baby killed this Putana demon. Okay, I guess Lord Narayan is protecting him. My little baby killed this Trinavarta. And so many other things are going on. Even when he does extraordinary things, it doesn't shake their conviction, but he is ordinary and he's my son. He's just a little cowherd boy. And even when he shows his divinity, then they say, isn't that wonderful? My son is also God. It's not that God is my son, but my son is also God. And that's another one of his wonderful things. But anyway, it's not so important. So to them, it's not important. Why? Because that's not why I'm loving him. The residents of Vaikuntha and unlimited Vaikuntha planets and Ayodhya and so on, even Dwarka and Mathura, their love is motivated by the fact that he's God. But here, it's not so important. For me, what's important is who he is his person, is the personality. Godhead is one thing, but the personality is more important. So this type of shastra or teaching is really beyond anything that we've read up to now. But then we need to go back to Krishna's 2 Bhagavan Swayam, because in this 10th canto, we're hearing about three Krishnas, or at least Krishna is in three places. And we hear about Krishna in Vrindavan, and we hear about Krishna in Mathura, and we hear about Krishna in Dwarka. And they behave differently, and they do different things, and their bhav or their mood is different. So what do we do? Well, we have our Paribas Sutra. And the Paribas Sutra says that she treated him like her ordinary son. So this reigns supreme, which means that whatever you hear about of Krishna in other places, they are expansions of this Supreme Personality of Godhead, who's in Vrindavan. The Krishna in Dwarka, the Krishna in Mathura. And so the Hari that's being spoken about in the Vedas, in the Upanishads, in the Puranas, in the Itihasas, and everybody else, the original form of that Supreme Lord who's playing these different roles is Krishna in Vrindavan. Krishna's through Bhagavan Swami doesn't make it absolutely clear. At that stage, we're only seeing Krishna as manifesting different incarnations. But now, it's very clear that it's the son of Mother Jashoda who's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Parikshit Maharaj catches on. I've got it. But he asks this question, but how, the obvious question, how can you treat God as an ordinary person? How can this be a form of worship? So he asks this question, and Shukadeva Goswami doesn't answer it immediately. It becomes circuitous because it's for intelligent people. And here's the bell. And we're just going to stop for that bell a minute, and we'll be back in a minute. Or should we continue? Magatung. Hare Krishna. We're back again. That's the church opposite, and we didn't want the ringing bells. We didn't want that the ringing bells obstruct too much the talk. Okay, so Parikshit Maharaj says, how can treating God as an ordinary son, how can that be considered to be worship? And of course the answer is that when it's done with pure love, and you've got to get to that pure love, and to get to that pure love, you have to practice all the teachings of the first 9 cantos. Whatever Shukadeva Goswami spoke up to now, you have to put that into practice. And when you've put it into practice and gotten all the even unspoken things that are needed, then that happens. This is, Parikshit Maharaj recognizes, this is something special, this is something very different. And he wants to know, well, if this is such a wonderful thing that a motherly love is considered to be the supreme form of worship, he says, how do you attain this type of perfection? And so he wants to know. And then comes the next verse, verse 46. So this is what he's asking. What past auspicious activities did she and Nanda Maharaj perform to achieve such perfection in ecstatic love? This is only part of the verse, but it's enough. And so he wants to know, what did she do? How did she get there? So it's a bit of a enigma for Shukadeva Goswami, because obviously she didn't get there. She's always Krishna's mother. But he needs to address the question because the question is very relevant. How do you get there? How do we get there? How do the other followers of Srimad Bhagavatam come to this stage of perfection? So Parikshit Maharaj goes on to the next verse, which we're also going to read before analyzing this. Although Krishna was so pleased with Vasudeva and Devaki that he descended as their son, they could not enjoy Krishna's magnanimous childhood pastimes, which are so great, quote, simply chanting about them vanquishes the contamination of the material world. Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda, however, enjoyed these pastimes fully, and therefore their position is always better than that of Vasudeva and Devaki. So Parikshit Maharaj immediately picked up on this. It's more important to be the foster parent than it is to be the parent who actually gives birth. But they didn't get the opportunity to be with him. It's going to be 11 years before Krishna comes back to Mathura, and then from there goes to Dwarka. But, you know, you missed out on childhood pastimes. You missed out on a child growing up. For a parent, that's like a phenomenal loss. He's coming back. You're already coming back as an adult. So now Shukadeva Goswami has to give an answer. And because Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yashoda are eternal associates, he can't say, well, this is how you become like her, or this is how you become her, or this is how she became Nanda and Yashoda, because Nanda and Yashoda are eternal positions, and Srila Prabhupada really hammers that in his purports. But he does tell the story of Drona and Dara. So Shukadeva Goswami speaks about the story of Drona and Dara, which I'm not going to get into in detail, but it's the story of how sadhakas became siddhas, and how this is a story about Drona and Dara, who are in the heavenly planets. They perform, they're great devotees. They're already great devotees. Their history and background we know very little about, but they attained perfection. They knew that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and they wanted Krishna as their son. We're going to get to this. But what happens is that Shukadeva Goswami does actually address Parikshit Maharaj's question, because when they actually have the fulfillment of their request, they enter into the bodies of Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yashoda. And this is one of those things, how do multiple living entities reside in the same body? But we won't get into that. They merge into the body. So, but they're examples that we can now follow, and they're very important. That pastime is extremely important of how it is that Drona and Dara got to this position of becoming parents. Because it isn't that they merged into the body of Drona, of Nanda and Yashoda, and they became like cells, and they, like Nanda and Yashoda, fully enjoyed Krishna's childhood. Not thinking that, oh, look, there's like, you know, just like sometimes you read this where you have conjoined twins, and, you know, they look at each other. So it isn't that Drona and Dara, Ananda and Yashoda, they're aware of each other. As far as they're concerned, they're the mother and father. But now here you got an example of how does Drona and Dara come to the position of being like Nanda and Yashoda. And it's always like. They don't become Nanda and Yashoda. They become like Nanda and Yashoda and Braj. And of course there's a issue here to resolve. Well, but they are the parents. Well, they are the parents because Drona and Dara are the heavenly expansions of Nanda and Yashoda from Goloka. I don't want to complicate that, but this is why they can actually become direct parents. Otherwise, people become relatives, elders, and so on, who have the same type of parental feeling. So now we begin Damodara-lila. And for all of you who've hung in there for the last 1 hour and 6 minutes, thank you very much. And I'm going to try to finish in time. So devotees need to know how this happened and what is the example. I'm not going to describe Damodara-lila. You're going to get a lot of real valuable explanation on that, and most of you know about this because it's such a wonderful pastime. But there are very important points that I just want to raise. Because the overall purpose, which Shukadeva Goswami is going to speak about in the next chapter, the overall purpose of this Leela is to show that not only does Mother Yashoda worship Krishna as my ordinary son with this extraordinary love, but that love ties down God. God becomes bound by that love. Literally speaking, it's so overwhelming is that his godhood is also overwhelmed. So everywhere else, Krishna is killing everybody. Everybody else, he's binding everybody. Everywhere else, he is controlling everybody. But now he is, literally speaking, controlled. Not controlled because he's playing a game. Oh, I should go along with this. He becomes fully under control of that love. So it's an extraordinarily powerful thing. And throughout Braja-lila, throughout his pastimes in Vrindavan, this is the same thing, and it's repeated when it's either by Krishna's friends, or Krishna's lovers, or Krishna's servants. Their type of love overwhelms him. And of course, Bhagavatam will go on to more detail to point out that of all the devotees in Vrindavan, it's the gopis whose love is most overwhelming, and amongst the gopis there's one whose name is indirectly being mentioned by Shukadeva Goswami, although Srila Prabhupada explains it. Unfortunately, Prabhupada didn't explain it in Srimad Bhagavatam because it didn't stay long enough with us to explain it in the Bhagavatam, but he does explain it in Chaitanya Charitamrita. I won't get into that. So what happens with this dependence is that when his mother doesn't breastfeed him, and this is of course Damodara-lila, then he cries, he gets upset. He's dependent. He feels dependent on his parents. He's experiencing that, just like we were all dependent on our parents. Why should we experience something that Krishna can't? So Krishna doesn't go in for things like that. And it wasn't that I'm thinking, well, I'm going to be Sivarama Swami later on when I'm 72 years old, and so I'll just play this role and be dependent on my mother when I'm 2 years old. It's not there. So I'm fully identifying with whatever my role was as a little baby. Krishna wants the same thing. He doesn't want to be shortchanged. He wants to be able to experience the same thing as others. So with his friends, he's an intimate friend and a confidant. With his gopis, he's in the role of a lover. And at the same time, he's killing demons. And the cowherd boys are coming, you want to hear what demon Krishna killed today? And it doesn't occur to him, well, maybe the demons that the demigods are running away from wasn't just like an ordinary cowherd boy. But they love him too much to think about it. And even if they do, they think, it's just a show. You're just putting this on. We know that you can't do those things. So this Braja Bhakti becomes such a very extraordinary thing. We can't get into it in too much detail, but we're getting an idea. We're getting this sort of, it's like the, when you go to a movie, and I hope nobody's going to any movies, but I know that that's what happens. First of all, they have this sort of intro, and you get all of a sudden, you get this sort of vision of, what's going to happen, something very extraordinary. So Shukadeva Goswami is giving this by this Damodara-lila and the end of this universal form in the mouth. And at the end of this Damodara-lila, at the end where Mother Yashoda catches him and ties him up, so at the end of the chase, then there are 3 key verses, and we're going to read those 3 key verses. Shukadeva Goswami makes this point. Everyone is under this person's control, this supreme person's control, but he is under the control of those who love him, unconditionally love him, and love him for his personality. not for his divinity. So this now goes to verse 9, verse 19 in chapter 9, and you see the following. O Maharaj Parikshit, this entire universe with its great exalted demigods like Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma, and Lord Indra is under the control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, yet the Supreme Lord has one transcendental attribute. He has many transcendental, but here this is one outstanding. This is his supreme quality, Krishna's supreme quality. He comes under the control of his devotees. This was now exhibited by Krishna in his pastimes. So, to the degree that devotees love him, to that degree he comes under control. When devotees love him unconditionally, he's unconditionally under the control of his devotees. So it means that Krishna is no longer independent. Abhigya Swarat, Bhagavatam starts like that. He's independent. Now he's no longer independent. He becomes dependent. And here devotee should be understood to be devotee like Mother Yashoda. It means someone like Mother Yashoda. And not Brahma, not Shiva, not Lakshmi Devi, as we see in the next verse. Neither Lord Brahma, nor Lord Shiva, nor even the goddess of fortune, who's always the better half of the Supreme Lord, can obtain from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the deliverer from the material world, such mercy as received by Mother Yashoda. So, and we're talking about not ordinary people, we're talking about Lord Brahma, our creator, Sampradaya, Acharya, Lord Shiva, who's actually just another incarnation of the Lord, and the goddess of fortune, who's always residing on the chest of the Lord. None of them get the same kind of mercy as Mother Yashoda does. So, and what is that mercy? That mercy is that Prabhupada told Satsvarup Maharaj in the beginning, you love me and I'll love you. So, Yejatam Amprapadyante, in the way that they love him, so he loves them proportionately. So this type of perfection, the Gyanis don't achieve, the Vaidhi Bhaktis don't achieve. The devotees who worship in devotional service, regulated devotional service, whose destination is Vaikuntha, or even perhaps Dwarka or Mathura, they cannot get the type of mercy that Mother Yashoda gets. There is a special sadhana. And so the last verse is the following. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, the son of Mother Yashoda, is accessible to devotees engaged in spontaneous, loving service. But he is not as easily accessible to mental speculators, to those striving for self-realization by severe austerities and penances, or to those who consider the body the same as the self. Devotees engaged in spontaneous loving service, very clear. He's not as easily accessible. It means he's not accessible. It means that if you're a mental speculator, if you're practicing regulated devotional service, if you're striving for self-realization by austerities, by that, you don't get Krishna. But by that, if you follow the process of devotional service, then you can come to that stage of spontaneous devotional service, and with that you get it. Otherwise, no one, nowhere has access to Krishna. It's a very restricted and private club. So, after this, we have the falling of the Yamal Arjun trees, and then the Sukadeva Goswami narrates the history of Nalakuvera and Manikriva and how they got here. And we see certain important elements that you're going to get a lot of feedback on. There's this unlimited rope. They just keep getting rope. All the rope in underground. They must have lots of rope in the whole city. And still, Mother Yashoda ignores it. This is the nature of the love. We're getting examples of how does this love work. You take miles and miles and miles of rope. I don't care. I'm tying them down. It doesn't. Maybe there's something special about this. Well, if there's anything special, this must be some kind of magic, some kind of potency that my little son has from a previous birth. But I don't care. I'm tying him down. And when she does tie him down, then very important thing which is being highlighted, and that Srila Prabhupada states, and that other devotees state, is that it takes Krishna's mercy and it takes effort. So to get this bhakti requires sadhana and it requires sadhya. And you have to be willing to go all out like Mother Yashoda. And she went all out. And they pulled down the trees, and it wasn't just her. She wasn't even there at that time. She was too embarrassed when she heard about the falling of the trees. So the Brajbasis, they didn't believe it. How can a little boy pull down the tree? Anyway, they're so old, maybe there was a gust of wind, and they got pulled down. Krishna's friends were there. They said, no, he did it. I said, you kids always make up stories. But he was still tied to the tree. So what happens? Nanda Maharaj comes and unties him. It's a very important point. Krishna can't untie himself. It wasn't that Krishna said, I had enough of this. It's not that he didn't untie himself, it's that he can't untie himself. Mother Yashoda tied him up. It was her love that tied him up. It's only someone who has the same type of love that can untie Krishna. Otherwise, Krishna cannot be tied. Krishna is making a very clear statement. So then it's the end of the pastime, in the middle of the chapter, and what happens? Shukadeva Goswami is talking about how ladies come and they clap, and when they clap, Krishna starts dancing, and they like doing this, so Krishna becomes like their puppet, and his mother says, bring your father's shoes, and he puts his father's shoes. We don't put our shoes on Gaurnitai's head. It's not our sadhana to put our shoes on the deity's head, but here, mother is saying to the deity, put your father's shoes on his head. And he enjoys it. And then later on, the other Brajbasis, the other mothers, come and complain. Your son passes stool in our living room. He passes stool. We've heard about that earlier. There was Maharaj Rishabdev. Of course, we know that his stool it was like perfume, long comb throughout for the next 8 miles all around. Beautiful aroma. You have to be very ordinary to be doing things like that. So, but still back to the point, which is Parikshit Maharaj's point. How do you attain this type of devotion? So, we have the indicator of the sadhana siddhas, Drona and Dara, and if you read the pastime, and please read, there's just a few verses that talk about how they did actually attain that perfection. In that pastime, they were asking for a boon. They wanted a boon that the Supreme Lord becomes their son, so that people who hear about their pastimes with him, that number one, that they become purified, and number two, that they can attain the same result. Don't gloss it over. Very important. This is the essence of the type of bhakti that gets us to where Mother Yashoda is. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that they prayed for prema. Shukadeva Goswami doesn't explicitly say, this is the prema, but he does explicitly give the elements in different places. The parts are spread out. You have to study it to find them. So Srila Prabhupada gives us some hints, and now you have to picture Srila Prabhupada. He's laying on 90 minutes is 1:30. And when we're at 1:21. Srila Prabhupada is laying on the bed in the month of Kartik, and he's dictating this, and Prabhupada writes the following. While churning the butter, and this is the beginning of the Leela, as Mother Yashoda is churning butter and Krishna is still sleeping. Mother Yashoda was singing about the childhood activities of Krishna. It was formerly a custom that if one wanted to remember something constantly, he would transform it into poetry or have this done by a professional poet. It appears that Mother Yashoda did not want to forget Krishna's activities at any time. Therefore, she poeticized all of Krishna's childhood activities, such as the killing of Putana, Agasura, Shakatasura, and Trinavarta. Jiva Goswami gives some of the songs that some of these songs that the Brijpasi sang. And while churning the butter, she sang about these activities in a poetic form. This should be the practice of persons eager to remain Krishna conscious 24 hours a day. This incident shows how Krishna conscious Mother Yashoda was. To stay in Krishna consciousness, we should follow such persons. The Srila Prabhupada is repeating the same thing he'd already commented on in Upadeshamrita, where Rupa Goswami tells us that Braja Anugami, Jana Anugami, you should follow the residents of Vrindavan. And then Prabhupada continues. And this is the purport to the next verse. Anyone who desires to be Krishna conscious in motherly affection or parental affection, I'll just stop there. Prabhupada says, well, if you've come to that stage of Krishna consciousness where you're attracted to worshiping Krishna like Mother Yashoda, you should contemplate the bodily features of Mother Yashoda. So meditate on what Mother Yashoda looks like. It is not that one should desire to become like Yashoda, for this is Mayavad. Either in parental affection or conjugal love, friendship, or servitorship, in any way, we must follow in the footsteps of the inhabitants of Vrindavan, not try to become like them. Therefore, this description is provided here. Advanced devotees must cherish this description, always thinking of Mother Yashoda's features, how she was dressed, how she was working and perspiring, how beautifully the flowers were arranged in her hair, and so on. One should take advantage of the full description provided here by thinking of Mother Yashoda in maternal affection for Krishna. So, Srila Prabhupada is really giving key things. They should not be glossed over. These are the real elements of the type of bhakti that, for those who have matured in the first 9 cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam and have applied them and become purified and advanced in Krishna consciousness, this is what follows. Now, we're summarizing what Srila Prabhupada here said. You sing about and chant about Krishna in the way that Mother Yashoda did. So many pastimes, the killing of demons, and so many things that Krishna does. We should follow the others who do similar things, such as Mother Yashoda, or Prabhupada then lists the other 4 rasas. And you can contemplate the features of those devotees. In Srimad Bhagavatam, here it's limited, how it's described. Nectar of Devotion, the features of the different devotees are described in detail. So it's a very nice asset that we have there. And we meditate on them, which means we meditate on their pastimes, and we meditate on how they relate to Krishna, because their pastimes means when Krishna is there. So these become essential features of a sadhana. Now, this is not just, a numerical thing. 4 regulative principles, chanting 16 rounds. Okay, you've got to be here at 4:30 in the morning. These are not something that are just bound with certain rules. These are really things that you have to do and cultivate and make an effort in, and specifically with your mind. So it's not easy. That means that you have to have a controlled mind. If you don't have a controlled mind, it's going to be very hard to be practicing what Srila Prabhupada here is recommending. Let's look at what Drona and Dara actually prayed. And this is 849. In Drona and Dara's prayer, Drona and Dara said, "Please permit us to be born on the same planet, Earth, so that after our appearance, the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, the Supreme Controller and Master of all planets, they know who He is, will also appear and spread devotional service." This is one of the reasons why Krishna is coming. He wants everyone to get devotional service. What type of devotional service? This type of devotional service. The ultimate goal of life, because this is the ultimate. When you say ultimate, then it has to be the ultimate. So that those born in the material world may be very easily be delivered from the miserable condition of materialistic life by accepting this devotional service. Well, the one here is this very easily delivered. Drona and Dara were living in a different age. They went through phenomenal austerities. So I don't know why they're saying very easily delivered, because it wasn't very easy for them. And you may note that it's not as easy as it seems. But it's very easy. The problem is that things are even the easy things are very difficult for us. Katanchana smite jasmin. But if you want difficult things to get easy, then Sukharam Dukharam Bhavet, Sri Chaitanya, then you have to remember and pray to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Then it becomes very easy. Or you recognize that actually, yeah, the easy thing is really easy. Prabhupada would always say, many, many times Prabhupada says, all you have to do is just love Krishna. And it was easy for Prabhupada because Prabhupada just loved Krishna. So, and that's all it really takes. Actually, this is all it's about is love Krishna, and this is then the highest sadhya. But getting to this type of loving Krishna, which is very exclusive, because we see Prahlad Maharaj, Dhruva Maharaj, they don't have this type of love. They have a different type of love, but not this type of love. So, to this, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur adds, and we're reading, in the future, he's paraphrasing what they're saying. Others who hear about and glorify the services we rendered to the cowherd boy Krishna will easily attain that most difficult to obtain liberation. In this way, Drona and Dara performed pure sadhana bhakti and prayed for pure prema bhakti. And we also note in the Leela that Lord Brahma gave his blessings. So now I'm summarizing what is it that Drona and Dara gave. I'm summarizing the different aspects of this sadhana that we get from different places, from Srila Prabhupada, from Drona and Dara, from Shukadev Goswami, and then we'll put it all together. It gets very easy if you love Krishna. So the summary of what Drona and Dara says that this is actually very difficult. But, and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, but if someone accepts Krishna's divinity and they perform pure sadhana by hearing and glorifying Krishna's pastimes, and they have a real eager desire, they pray for that type of love that Mother Yashoda had. So Drona and Dara were very aware that as they practice their sadhana, this is not going to be a mechanical thing. I have to pray for this. And I have to have the blessings of superiors. And here, the blessings of Brahma. Brahma gave, tatastu. All right, let it happen. So, of course, there's a whole argument about whether Brahma can bless someone to have something that he doesn't have. We already read the verses that Brahma, Shiva, Lakshmi don't have this. They don't have this type of love. So, but anyway, that's another topic. But still, we need the blessings of Vaishnavas to move forward. Now, we look at Shukadeva Goswami's statement. And this is the last verse of the 8th chapter. After Drona and Dara took birth, he says this: Thereafter, O Maharaj Parikshit, best of the Bharatas, when the Supreme Personality of Godhead became the son of Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda, they maintained continuous, unswerving devotional love and parental affection. And in their association, all the other inhabitants of Vrindavan, the Gopas and Gopis, developed the culture of Krishna Bhakti. So here we hear a development of devotional service. We hear the development of devotional service and how the others in Vrindavan also managed to acquire this. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments, he adds the following. He said, Krishna, along with Balaram, instilled prema in the hearts of Nanda and Yashoda and all the other Brijbasis, Chakre Tesham Priti, through his wonderful pastimes in Braja Gokula. So let's summarize. What are the sadhana elements? Because remember, that's what we're doing right now. What are the sadhana elements? You have to associate with those who love Krishna. Somehow or another, that's Sangha. Mother Yashoda had love for Krishna, and what's Shukadeva Goswami is saying here, by their association, all the other Brijbasis became equally mad after Krishna. The other point is that the nature of hearing about Krishna's pastimes, Tavakatamritam, Tapta Jivanam, is that it instills prema. It's just like chanting Hare Krishna. By chanting Hare Krishna, you get love for Krishna. Similarly, hearing about Krishna instills this prema bhakti, priti, chakre tesham pritim. I'm quoting Vishwanath. Krishna and Balaram instilled prema. So within these pastimes is instilled that love for Krishna. That's why you have to hear and read continually. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. We already start off right in the beginning by this. This is as much as we get from this Leela. And I just want to bring in another couple of aspects that come from other parts of the Bhagavatam. Yagyai Sankirtana Prayer Yajantihi Sumedasa. You have to do Sankirtan. So this comes later on. This has to be part of the sadhana. And, of course, what does Sankirtan mean? It means Harinam. It means chanting the names of the Lord. And this Damodara-lila emphasizes another thing. You can try and try and try and try, but you got to get mercy. And that has to come from Krishna. Krishna has to be satisfied. All right, all the flowers have fallen out of Mother Yashoda's hair. She's perspiring. All of her mascara has flowed all over the place. She's been doing this for a long time. There's no rope left anywhere in the village. All right, then, all. So that type of sadhana. So it requires a sadhana that invokes mercy because it's a two-way affair. The sadhana has to have its certain elements, but it has to invoke Krishna's mercy. Okay, now I'm adding up all of these things that we're getting from these different venues. First of all, it's very difficult. Second of all, you have to perfect your devotional service in regulated devotion. Everyone will not agree with me on that, but that's the path that Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has given us, is that devotees need to know how to follow the rules and regulations, and they have to have Chaitodarpana Marjanam, purified their heart, and go through the stages where they come to Nishtha, and they start to get a real attachment towards the process of chanting and hearing. And then attachment actually awakens for Krishna. Not love, but attraction. And that attraction becomes intense enough that devotees are so determined that they're able to cry after Krishna. It becomes a real demanding, a real essential feature of their effort. So the training of the first 9 cantos must be there, as well as the closure of Canto 11 and 12. And that sadhana, Harinama eva kevalam, it has to be chanting the holy names of the Lord. So then you could say that, but there's more than that. There's actually Sankirtan, there's book distribution, prasadam distribution, because that contributes, although it's not mentioned here, but this is what Drona and Dara appeared for. We want so that others will be benefited. This is Sankirtan. They're doing it for the benefit of others. And Sankirtan is there because it's also not just benefiting others, but it's also an element that will invoke the mercy of the Lord. When it comes to sadhana invoking mercy, this part of the sadhana is very important. You have to have blessings of Vaishnavas, like Lord Brahma, and you must have association. If you can get association with devotees who actually have love for Krishna, or devotees who have at least attachment for Krishna, who are advanced devotee association, because it rubs off. And of course, singing and chanting about Krishna's lila, Krishna's name, but we should be hearing, and we should be studying, and we should be absorbed. So it won't happen by minimum effort. It didn't that Mother Jashoda Krishna ran off, she ran after him a little, and she says, okay, I'm no match for him. He's already a 3-year-old child, he can run faster than me, I'll just leave it, he'll come back later. But Krishna wasn't about to come back. He saw the stick, he was headed off, I'm going off living in the forest. That was on Krishna's mind. So not that type of reading is not enough. It requires more. And Prabhupada points out, follow a person. As one awakens a certain type of attraction, you follow the person of your choice. He says, devotees who are inclined for the mood of devotional service, they should follow Mother Jashoda. Others, follow somebody else and contemplate their features, contemplate on their pastimes, their services to Krishna, how they interact for Krishna. And you have to pray. So Chakravarti Thakur points out, you have to pray for this pure bhakti, and one has to pray intensely. And as I mentioned before, we must get the mercy. We're finishing. It's coming to an end, about 2 minutes. What's the result? One is that, and this is the sadhana. So, if you want me to go over it quickly, even if you don't, I'll do it. It's very difficult. You really have to embrace the process of Vaidhi Bhakti. You have to chant Hare Krishna and participate in the Sankirtan movement, be in good relationship with Vaishnavas and get their blessings. Look for association with those who are advanced, those who love Krishna. Study, hear, chant about Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan, and of course elsewhere. But remember that those are expansions of Krishna. And certainly in our effort to get to that point, it isn't that we become exclusive. We're only going to be looking at these 40-odd chapters in the first canto, and beyond that, we're not interested in reading anything else. Everything else is of interest, but Krishna's too Bhagavan Swayam, and she thought her son was just an ordinary boy. So with that type of Paribas Sutra in mind, we have faith that yes, the nature of these pastimes is that they also instill pain. We follow a person of our choice, we contemplate their features, meditate on their pastimes, pray for pure bhakti, and ultimately somehow or another get the mercy of the Lord. And the result is that you become free from all contamination. Vikriditam brajavadhubiridam cha Vishnu sharaminam shinuyat anivarnayadya bhakti param bhagavati pratilabdalabhya hridroga kama ashu. So whatever traces of material attachment remain in the heart, by this practice of devotional service, it will become completely vanquished, purified. And you develop bhakti by that association, and prema will awaken within the heart by associating with those of like mentality. Rupa Goswami says, Sajati Asnigdha. You should look for people who have the same mood of devotion. Then love will come. A love like Mother Yashoda, a love like Sridham, a love like other members of Vrindavan. It will gradually awaken in the heart. And when that love comes, then increasingly more and more mercy comes from Krishna. And ultimately, that love becomes so powerful that Krishna comes under control. Krishna comes under the control of anyone who loves him. And that's our business. Under control means that we have a loving relationship. We're not there to lord it over Krishna, and that's why we want under control, but that becomes the result. And ultimately, one takes birth in Vrindavan. One becomes a Brijbasi, and we go back home, back to Godhead. That's our real business. So keep this perspective of Srimad Bhagavatam, of the 10th canto. Whatever you're reading on the 10th canto, remember that it's always Krishna in Vrindavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is manifesting in this particular way. See everything in context, and recognize that this loving devotional service that the residents of Vrindavan have is the highest attainment. It's what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to give, to make easily available to everyone. Krishna Prema Pradayate, it's this type of love. It comes mainly by chanting Hare Krishna and including these other elements in our sadhana, and it's exemplified by Damodara-lila. Okay, that's it. 1 hour, 45 minutes. We went 15 minutes over the maximum time. I don't know what they're going to do, whether they're going to edit this. And speaking about Damodara-lila, here's the last thing that you can see. I was inspired once to write a book on the pastimes of Lord Damodar, and the idea was that to put Mother Yashoda actually in the forefront as the person who actually tied Krishna down, as the sort of central figure, or as the co-hero. Do we get to see that at all? It's there. Oh, okay. So anyway, they're seeing it. The devotees here don't need to see it. So you're all seeing it. It's called Damodar Janani, or the glories of the mother of Lord Damodar. If you want a detailed exposition on these chapters from 8 to 11, then you can order it there. And that's it. Thank you all very much for your patience and tolerance. I'm sorry I dragged it out this long, but that seems to be the way things work nowadays for me. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Shukdev Goswami ki jai. Srimati Yashoda Devi ki jai. Shri Krishna Bhagavan ki jai. Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi. Hari 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 Bol.